But wait, there's more. The Apostle John tricks us into believing that his resurrection account comes to an inconclusive finale at the end of chapter 20. Following the transformative story of Jesus and Thomas, this great story about faith and believing the impossible, we only receive some words regarding how Jesus continued to dwell with his disciples, performing miraculous signs here on earth. And then we reach the end of the text. John's excuse for not recording anything that happened next seemingly has a purpose. Even when there are no written words, visible facts, or first-hand witnesses, the readers may trust and therefore believe that Jesus certainly resurrected from the dead with power and authority, for he is both the Son of God and the expected Messiah. Well, I think most of us would have been okay with such a gospel ending and its implied message. Nothing extraordinary, right? But at least practical. Except that is not quite the end. As you probably already know, this gospel story continues for one more chapter that contains two more stories. So I picture the Apostle John in an informational kind of setting. He has presented us with all the revolutionary facts about this product for at least 20 other chapters. He has made his sales pitch and is ready to make us an offer that we cannot resist. And when we think this deal cannot get any better, he says to us in a dynamic and flamboyant voice, "But wait, there's more. The story is not over yet. You must keep reading." Well, the origin and authenticity of the stories that follow in chapter 21 are somewhat disputed. Many biblical scholars agree that this epilogue guides our attention to one unparalleled truth. The risen Christ was not a vision or a hallucination, not even a spirit, but a real human person. The writer of chapter 21 is no longer concerned with presenting us a divine Jesus. He is not defending Jesus' divinity. We already have 20 chapters that witness to that truth. On the contrary, he wants to remind us of the humanity of the Son of God following the resurrection. This is what makes chapter 21 so special and so unique. Jesus returns here to earth after defeating triumphantly death, not with armies of angels or explicit superpowers or a new divine image. Jesus comes back to us in the same way he did before, in both flesh and bones, very humbly and very ordinary, fully human and fully God. I lived in Texas for almost 10 years and never once went fishing or hunting. You know, that is a very Texas thing to do. I haven't really found a particular interest for either of those activities. Plenty of people tell me how fun and relaxing fishing can be, especially if you are with dear friends and a couple of six-packs. I have also been told that fishing can be very spiritual or meditative, and a great bonding experience between parents and their children. These friends also remind me that fishing, oftentimes, is not about the fish you catch, but about the experience of finding the fish. That does sound very deep and meaningful indeed. Perhaps one of these days, in the not so far future, I will finally give in and join the next time someone invites me to go fishing and experience what the buzz is all about. But you see, this is how I want to picture the disciples from this story in chapter 21. I want to believe that they are having a fun and relaxing time following the resurrection, They're fishing at the shoreline of the Sea of Galilee. And in my mind, I try to imagine them bonding together, making decisions about their future as a group, healing their broken friendships, the tensions they had, figuring out who they are meant to be as God's people following the resurrection. But I'm afraid that is not the case. Chapter 21 doesn't present us a happy, relaxed, helpful group of friends. Professor Joy J. Moore from Luther Seminary shares the following regarding the disciples' distressing new reality following the resurrection. Failing to move forward, she says, career fishermen fail to catch anything all night long. So their impatience and confusion is marred with disappointment. This makes John's narrative allusion noteworthy. Failure in fishing brings back the failed mission felt on that Friday night. Unachieved goals mirror the anticlimax when the resurrected Jesus appears with promises of power and then leaves again at the moment of the recognition. For me, it may almost sound unlikely that the disciples wouldn't be able to catch any fish. Not one fish. The empty net, therefore, I believe represents something else, something more meaningful. I think this illustration makes us aware of the emptiness the disciples were feeling within them. They were themselves once again, empty-handed and with empty hopes. They lacked direction and purpose. But how could they move on and continue to live happily into their calling if their lives felt so empty? How can we move on and continue to live into our calling when we currently feel and experience such emptiness within ourselves? We continue to see empty churches, empty streets, empty homes, empty pantries, empty hands, empty pockets, and even empty hearts. And so it is difficult to take a step forward and walk by faith when we feel so weak and hunger for a spiritual revolution. It is indeed difficult to continue to live into our calling as people of the resurrection, especially during these trying times. Jesus then called out to the disciples from the shore, saying, "Friends, have you caught any fish?" Well, if it had been me, one of those disciples, right there on that boat, fully aware that we had not caught anything throughout the whole night, and most likely now having tensions with my friends, and someone yelled from the shore, "Have you caught anything?" I would have lost it. I would have been so angry. I would have reacted so poorly, filled with frustration. I would have said some pretty mean things, to be honest. This part of the story reminds me of a very typical experience. When a person is clearly crying and someone draws near and dares to ask them, "Are you crying?" Or when you are on a road trip and one of your little ones asks from the back seat over and over and over again, "Are we there yet?" Or when everyone around us keeps asking, "When will we go back to normal?" Those obvious, obnoxious, and uncertain questions tend to bring the worst out of us. Our patience suddenly reaches an end and we explode with sarcasm and hostility, and we hurt others even if it is not our intention. That is exactly how I imagine the firm no that comes from the boat, the reply from the disciples. So Jesus, after hearing this unapologetic no, confirms that his beloved friends have reached their limit. They are exhausted, they are defeated, they are hungry and afraid, waiting for the sun to rise up on the east and hopefully bring them good news. Their net is empty, their hearts are empty, their future is empty. So, what is left to do? How do we find the strength to move forward and continue to live as people of the resurrection? How? Like the disciples, the only thing we can do is to throw our nets on the right side of the boat and wait. We wait because we know and we believe that the story is not over yet. Consequently, as the disciples become aware of the many fish that they have now caught by following the instructions from this mysterious man across the shore, they can't help but think that it was indeed a miracle, a miraculous catch of fish. And the only one who has done miracles like this before is none other than Jesus. So Jesus has finally shown up. He has come and brought one last miracle. But here's the thing. That last miracle was not the fish. It was something deeper. And yet also something rather ordinary and easy to forget. That miracle was perspective. The disciples needed a new perspective. They were so overwhelmed by their current reality and their uncertain future that they had neglected the good news they had received and experienced just a few days ago. They were returning to their old ways of life, waiting once again for the Messiah to show up, hoping to see a sign or witness a miracle that will guide them into the future and somehow take their fear away. But all they really needed was to remember who they were, to whom they belonged, and fix their sight into a new perspective. We all need a new miraculous perspective right now. This morning would have been my last drive up to Lebanon. I would have parked next to the church and carried all my stuff into the pastor's office. But as I had walked my way into that place, many familiar and friendly faces would have said, "Good morning," or "Hello, Hasiel and Jesse," or "It is so good to see you. How have you been? How are things going? How is the move? What are the plans for the future?" And so we would have exchanged some precious stories right before worship about ourselves. Then I would have checked with Jenny, Lian, and Pastor Michelle about all the last details for worship and become excited about the liturgical pieces that were ready for that morning. This would have been the last time to hear both Bud and Lisa playing beautifully both the organ and piano, and also hearing the choir sing the anthem. I would have heard your joys and concerns as a community of faith, and then prayed together in the same space one last time. And then we would have shared signs of goodwill and sweet farewells following worship. Even maybe a picnic or something. It would have been a glorious Sunday. So special, so comforting, so powerful. So now, being on the opposite side of the spectrum, apart from all of you and recording this sermon in the distance from home, this Sunday may feel rather empty. And honestly, I feel somewhat empty. This is the moment when I must ask for a new perspective. I need Jesus to call my name from the shore and teach me how to find fish, how to move forward faithfully as a person of the resurrection. And so I trust Jesus' words and I throw my net on the right side of the boat and I wait. I wait. And as I begin to wait, I also begin to remember all the good things that we shared together. All the really extraordinary things that we shared together. I remember the very first time that I met you and how we all worshiped together, how welcoming you all were with me. I remember how different and engaging worshiping was when we were in the community room as the sanctuary was being remodeled. I remember how you came to my ordination and received me with a kind ovation the following Sunday. I remember how last summer we saw each other every other Sunday, trying new things in worship and partaking of the Lord's table together. I remember all the laughs, all the difficulties we voiced, and all the changes we encountered during these past 2 years. What a blessing. As I continue to remember all these precious stories, I come to the realization that I do not leave this boat empty-handed. My net is full of precious memories, amazing stories, and optimistic hopes. And so my perspective begins to change. I realize that also the story is not over yet. There is still more to come. There are way too many things to be grateful for. So this is my invitation for you, dear First Presbyterian Church. I know we are facing difficult times that are making us question our calling as people of the resurrection. I know we are struggling with the emptiness we see and experience all over the place and at first hand. But even if we feel as if we have reached our limit, we must remember that the story continues. We are the disciples living in chapter 21, and Jesus is appearing to us right here, right now, one more time to encourage us and direct us with a new perspective. And so we must turn our nets and recall all the goodness and all the faithfulness that God has shown us before. We must remember the good news of Easter that we heard just a few weeks ago. Yes, those news that nothing can separate us from the love of God and from the love that we have for each other. We must bring to mind the many ways in which we shared grace, kindness, and forgiveness with one another. We must look back at those precious moments that changed our lives for the better, where we found unity and comfort. We must hold on to that which is good, selfless, and courageous. But most importantly, we must trust God and have faith. And you see, the best way to remember and share stories is always over a meal, and even over a breakfast. So Jesus is asking us to bring some of the fish that we have caught and share it with him, sit with him, and tell him our stories. But wait, there's more. As you share these stories with Jesus, you must also share some of the fish that you have caught with the whole world, because we are all hungry for some really good news. So share those stories with your neighbors and your loved ones. Share goodness and faithfulness even in the distance. Share grace and kindness in unexpected ways. Share a virtual hug or a home cooked meal. Share the transforming good news of Easter. For when we share all of these things and even more, we live a life of abundance and not emptiness. We proclaim a truth that gives us a new perspective and an inclusive vision for the future. And we persevere into our calling as people of the resurrection. So come and have breakfast and see all the goodness that God has prepared for you. Alleluia. Amen.